All right then, econ friends, welcome back. So now we know what market structure is, and we also know what the PC market structure, the perfect competition or the perfectly competitive market structure entails. Specifically, price takers with a horizontal, perfectly elastic demand curve that corresponds to the market price. With that said, now we jump into the critical decision that the firm operating within this industry has to make. Okay, so again, we have the industry, which is made up of many firms. In this video, we're going to discuss the critical decisions that an individual firm has to make. Specifically, how do we maximize profit? Or sometimes, how do we minimize losses? At the end of the day, maximizing profits is the same as minimizing losses. And it's a decision that a firm has to make. Okay, let's jump in with the blanket statement. Like any other firm, the PC, the perfectly competitive firm, they're going to maximize profits as always by comparing revenue with cost. We know that profit equals total revenue minus total cost. So profit maximization decisions are always comparing those two. And the general rule that we're going to settle on, which you know well by now, is this. Any firm, any profit maximizing firm will continue to expand or increase their output for as long as the marginal revenue, in other words, the MR from the production and sale of an additional unit exceeds the marginal cost of that unit. So in other words, as a firm is looking at potential units of output to make, how much should we make? What they're asking is this: for each additional marginal next or extra unit, okay, so for each marginal unit, what is the additional benefit and what's the additional cost? Put that into business terms, what's the additional revenue? What's the additional cost? And what the firm says is, we're going to continue to expand our output. We're going to keep making stuff for as long as the marginal revenue of a product exceeds its marginal cost. So at the end of it all, to maximize profits in the short run, the competitive firm will produce output up until marginal cost just equals marginal revenue. In other words, they're going to produce up until the point at which MR equals MC. And this is a critical spot to tell you about a critical rule. Okay? The profit maximizing rule. And the profit maximizing rule says that any firm, regardless of their industry or their market structure, that they will produce a level of output, okay? They will produce Q at the point where MR equals MC, okay? This is the profit maximization rule. Remember, firms have to answer certain questions. How much to produce is the first question. That's the Q question. What output? What quantity level? The firm will always answer that question with the MR equals MC rule. The firm will maximize profits by producing the level of output at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost, okay? If there's a situation, as a little technical point, where marginal revenue does not exactly equal marginal cost, then the firm will maximize profits by producing the very last unit of output at which marginal revenue is greater than marginal cost. Remember, at no time would a profit maximizing firm produce such that marginal cost exceeded marginal revenue, because if they did that, they'd be losing money, and that's not a good thing. Okay, so profit max rule, produce up to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Probably good to give you a quick definition. Marginal revenue is defined as the additional revenue that a firm earns from selling one additional unit. Remember, marginal means extra or additional. So marginal revenue is the extra revenue, pardon me, that a firm earns when it sells one extra unit of a product. Okay. Important to note that in perfect competition, and in perfect competition only, but in this particular structure, the marginal revenue mathematically also equals the price, which is why in the earlier video, when we found the perfectly horizontal demand curve, we labeled it D and MR and P, because it's the same value. Okay. Formula for you: marginal revenue equals total revenue change divided by output change. So you can also see it as this: the change in total revenue divided by the change in output. Okay, so that's how much the firm produces. So now the Q question is answered. Beautiful. We also know that because the PC firm is a price taker, the P question has also been answered. So now we've determined how much to make, and we know what price to charge for it. Now we simply layer in the ATC curve and we figure out profit. Okay, let's start with a quick reminder. Our definition of profit: profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. We threw a little bit of algebra on that earlier, and we determined that marginal revenue, therefore, is also equal to the quantity multiplied by price minus ATC. Okay, mathematically, these are the same things. It's two different ways to analyze and determine profit. Okay, profit equals TR minus TC, and profit is equal to Q times P minus ATC. What this tells us, especially, that was really ugly. Oh, that's beautiful. What that P minus ATC thing tells us is this: a firm will earn economic profit when the market price, P, exceeds the firm's average total cost. Okay, again, this idea that P minus ATC is part of the profit equation tells us that the relationship between P and ATC will determine our profits, or maybe our losses. So one potential outcome is that the firm will earn economic profit, and this will occur whenever the market price, P, is greater than or exceeds the firm's average total cost, ATC. In other words, P is greater than ABC, so this number here is a positive number, and the firm makes profits. Beautiful. We can also see that right here mapped out. Okay, this is a really important graph, so let's dissect it and let's take all the previous knowledge that we learned and put it all together. Okay, we started off with the fact that this firm is a price taker, so it had to accept a perfectly horizontal, perfectly elastic demand curve. That's the demand curve, which is also the marginal revenue, which is also the price. And right here, it happens to be $12. Okay, so we start with that. We then know that we have, and I'll do it in red right here, we have the Nike swoosh marginal cost curve. So we know the cost curves from before. We just layered onto it the perfectly elastic marginal revenue, price, and demand curve. And therefore, our question of how much to make, we learned the rule, MR equal to MC. So we take MR, which is here, and MC, which is here, and they equal here. Based on where they equal, we take this down and we get the output, in this case, 5. We also have the price, in this case, 12. And then finally, we take a look, and I'll also do this in red, at the U-shaped ATC curve. And critically, we find the point where the quantity line intersects the ATC curve. We take that over, and this gives us an ATC of 8. We did a couple of steps there, and we determined profit. And you can see the profit right there. Let's erase this, and let's give it one more quick hit. And this time we'll take what we did, but we'll put it in steps. That way you have a systematic way to analyze this. We start off here with the graph. We have the horizontal demand curve. This is demand, which is marginal revenue, which is price. P equals 12. Step 1, do your MR equals MC rule to find Q. MR equals MC. You put a dot there, you drop this down, and you get your Q. Step 1, do MR equals MC, drop a dotted line down to get your Q. Step number 2, take that, I call the Q line, that dotted line, you take it to your demand curve, and then you go left. And this will give you price. So we take this Q equals 5, we figure out where that hits right here. Again, the demand curve, we go over, and there's our price. Now, notice that we have Q and we have P. This is really important because you know that P times Q is total revenue. So we see that right now, we've got this box right here, which I'm going to shade in green, right? This box right here would represent total revenue because it represents the height of price multiplied by the base of quantity. So that green box represents total revenue. Of course, we know that firms are not trying to maximize total revenue. They're trying to maximize profit. And we remember that profit is Q times P minus ATC. So step 3, we have to find ATC. And to do that, we take that same quantity line, that same dotted Q line that was right here. We take it to where it hits the ATC curve. We go left, and that gives us ATC. So we take this line to where it hits the ATC curve. We put the dot there. We take this to the left, and that gives us an ATC of 8. And now with those 3 steps, now we can solve profit. There's a couple ways to do it. Well, first of all, let's do it by the boxes. We had originally done this really big box right here that we called total revenue, P times Q. Well, we also have a box right here. And notice that this box right here that I'll shade in green is going to be total cost because the height is ATC and the base is Q, and ATC times Q equals total cost. So now we have the big box that was total revenue, the smaller box that was total cost, and since profit equals total revenue minus total cost, we have this leftover box right here, which is profit. So you can do it by boxes. Lo and behold, we also learned that profit is equal to Q times P minus ATC. Well, get this. This distance here is Q. And this gap, I'll put it in red so you can kind of see it. This gap right here, which is the P minus the ATC. So this distance here is P minus ATC. And since profit is equal to Q times P minus ATC, and this distance is Q, and this distance is ATC, we see yet again that this box is profit. So you can do it by way of boxes, looking at P and, P minus ATC and Q. You can also simply plug in the numbers. Since we know that profit, again, make some room here, right here, profit is equal to Q times P minus ATC. We know that our Q is 5. We know that P minus ATC is 12 minus 8, which is 4. Therefore, here, profit would be equal to $20. And you see it there. Okay, there are a lot of ways, my friends, to chew on this. There's a lot of ways to conceptualize profit. You can do the big box of TR minus the TC to get the leftover box. You can do the P minus ATC times Q. So you can do this by boxes. You can also plug in the actual numbers that you get and calculate the actual profit amount. Pardon me, I just lost my screen. Let me get this reconnected. Sorry about that. Having some internet problems today here on campus. And let's get this graph back up. And we're back. There it is. So the point is, there's many ways that you can interpret profit. You can use actual numbers, you can use boxes. It's part of your task in these units to become very fluent in the different ways to interpret economic data. But again, the big takeaway here is this. Since profit is equal to Q times P minus ATC, one potential situation that's going to emerge is economic profit. And this will be the case whenever P is greater than ATC. And I see that I made a mistake here. Sorry, this should be P is greater than ATC. My forgiveness, my apologies, please. Okay, so that's one potential outcome. You see it there in the graph. A couple of quick notes on this. Please note that in business, this value of P minus ATC, just to give you some jargon for your future business majors and business careers, this is known as profit per unit. So P minus ATC is known as profit per unit, and it's sometimes called in business jargon what we're going to call profit margin. So in the business world, if you hear, what's my profit per unit, or what's my per unit, or what's my margin, it all means the same thing. It's that critical difference between price, which is how much you get for it, and ATC, which is what it costs you to make. That difference is your profit, it's your margin. And the other thing, just to point out again, something obvious, a firm's goal is not to maximize the margin per unit, and it's not to maximize the number of units sold. The fundamental goal of the firm is to maximize total profit. So be very careful about focusing strictly on output or strictly on profit per unit. The firm's goal is to maximize total output. And it's going to do that again when P is greater than ATC, and that's one potential case. A second potential outcome, my friends, is going to be that the firm earns zero economic profit, which is also known as normal profit. And this is going to be the case when the market price of P exactly equals the firm's ATC. So in this case, P equals ATC. And again, if you go back to our formula, that profit is equal to Q times P minus ATC, Well, if these two numbers are equal, then there is no profit per unit. Therefore, profits total will be equal to 0, or what we call normal profit. Okay, so this is our second potential outcome. P is equal to ATC, economic profit. Economic profit is 0. Pardon me, that's normal profit. This is known as break even. Okay, the situation where P equals ATC is known as even. And in particular importance here, the firm's minimum ATC point, in other words, the very bottom, the very minimum of the firm's ATC curve is that firm's, what we're going to call break-even point. Okay, you can see here, same analysis as before. In the first example, P was greater than ATC because the price was 12. In this example, something has happened at the market or industry level. Supply and demand have shifted. So now the price has gone from 12 down to 7. You see here again that we have the horizontal demand curve. This is demand, which is marginal revenue, which is also price, which is equal to 7. We go through our steps. Step 1, find MR equal to MC, MC, MR. We put the dot there. We take that straight down. We get a quantity of 4. Excellent. Step 1 is done. Step 2, we figure out our price by taking our Q line up to the demand curve. So this Q line goes up, up, up. It hits the demand curve and it goes left, and price is 7. So now we have the P and we have the Q. If you wanted to do this with boxes, you would now have this box right here, which is P times Q, which would be total revenue. And then our third step, we're going to find our ATC, again by taking our Q line up, this time to the ATC curve, and then going left, and this gives us ATC. So again, we start at our Q, we go up to where we hit our ATC, that's right there. We go left, and this means that ATC also equals 7. So in this case, you see that at the Q line, the demand curve and the ATC curve intersect. This implies that P equals ATC. If you wanted to do boxes, this box is ATC times Q, which is total cost. It's also total revenue. Since total revenue equals total cost, there's no profit. Or seen a different way, you can go back to our formula. Profit is equal to Q times P minus ATC. And in this case, as you can see right here, P equals ATC. So there's 0 economic profit, AKA normal profit, AKA break even. And that, my friends, is our second potential outcome. So we have P greater than ATC, profit. P equals ATC, break even. Our third potential outcome, let's go back to our formula. As always, we stick with our principles. We already covered P greater than ATC. We covered P equal ATC. Our third potential outcome is going to be an economic loss. And the firm will suffer an economic loss when the market price falls below ATC. In other words, when P is less than ATC, or when P falls below the break-even point, that means, again, profit equals Q times P minus ATC. If P is less than ATC, then this value here is going to be a negative number, and that's negative profits, which we call losses. Not good, okay? Not good. So the firm will suffer a loss anytime the price falls below ATC. Now, it's important to remember that the firm cannot control price. The individual firm can control its costs, can control its production, but remember that the competitive firm is a price taker. So sometimes these economic losses, the firm has no control over them, okay? Changes in the price are determined at the industry level. And if there's dynamics and factors at the industry level that push market prices down below ATC, the firm is going to lose money, and sometimes through no fault of its own, just the fault of the cruel and impersonal market dynamics. Okay, so again, the firm will suffer a loss when P is less than ATC. Now, here's where it gets a little bit complicated. You're thinking, just now, all this previous crap wasn't? I know, but there's an extra decision to make when the firm has a loss, okay? When the firm is facing an economic loss, it has a tough choice to make, and it's got three potential options, okay? If the firm was making profits, that was easy. Profits are good, keep on producing, easy decision. When the firm was breaking even, it was still earning normal profit, easy decision, keep on producing. But the firm, when it's facing a loss, it's got to make a tough choice. And it's got three possible options. The first one is this. If the firm anticipates or expects that the current low market price is only temporary. In other words, if the firm believes that the losses are only temporary, that eventually the market will recover and prices will rise back up, and if the current market price P covers the firm's variable costs, in other words, if P exceeds AVC, then the firm will continue to operate in the short run, even at a loss. This is counterintuitive. You would think, well, if the firm is making profits, they keep producing, and therefore, if the firm is losing money, they stop. Not the case always. This case, which we call the loss minimizing case, suggests that if the price is greater than AVC, average variable costs, then the firm, if it stays open, can cover its variable expenses and have a little bit of money left over, right? A little bit of excess revenue after paying the variable costs, and they can take that excess revenue and apply it to the fixed cost to pay down some of that fixed cost, okay? So if there's a loss, the first option is continue producing even at a loss. This is called the loss minimizing condition, and the critical rule here is this. Price will be less than ATC, so there's a loss, but critically, if price is greater than AVC, keep producing, minimize losses by staying open. However, the second case would be this. If the market price drops below the firm's average variable cost, in other words, if we get to a condition where price is both below ATC and also below AVC, so the firm is losing money and it also is not able to cover its variable costs, not only will the firm still have to pay its fixed costs, but if it produces any output, it will not fully cover its variable costs either. In this case, if the firm continued to produce, it would face a double whammy. It would lose even more money because it would lose money by not covering variable costs and have to cover its fixed costs. In this case, in this situation right here, if the firm stayed open, it's going to have a double whammy loss. That's not good. So in this case, whenever P is less than ABC, temporarily ceasing, shutting down production will minimize losses. In other words, in this case, shutting down is preferable to continuing. This is known critically as the shutdown condition. And the firm's minimum AVC point, the lowest possible variable cost point, is called the firm's shutdown point. So now you know that the minimum ATC, average total cost, is the break-even point, and the minimum AVC, average variable cost, is the shutdown point. Okay? The big thing to understand here is that by shutting down, the firm will still have to cover its fixed costs, but it can temporarily cease and avoid its variable cost. So if it cannot charge a high enough price to cover those variable costs, it says, hell with this, let's cease our variable costs by temporarily shutting down. That's our second case. Okay, very important to remember that a shutdown and the shutdown condition is a temporary decision. Okay, when the firm decides to shut down, you have to remember that it anticipates, it expects that sometime in the future, market prices will rise back up again and that it will be pulled out of its loss condition. And therefore, when a firm makes a decision to shut down, it's a temporary decision, okay? Critically, the firm does not sell its assets. The firm does not terminate its leases. The firm does not go out of business. The firm is still a firm. It still has assets. It still has production capacity. It still has workers. It just shuts down. Examples of this are everywhere. Car washes close on days that it rains. Some restaurants close at lunch. Some pharmacies are open 24 hours. Others close at 2 in the morning. Others close at 10 at night. Okay, the short run decision can be looked at on an hourly basis or on a daily basis. Okay, the basis is less relevant than the fact that a firm simply calculates at what point will the total revenues that we receive for staying open fall short of our variable cost. In other words, at what point will price fall below AVC? In this situation, you shut it down. Okay? See right here, just so you can look at it graphically, we have two panels. Take a look at panel B. This is short run loss operating. Okay? So we're losing money. We're still going to operate. Notice in this case, we started off by doing MR equals MC. That's right here. And that gives us the Q line. And let's just highlight it. There's the Q line. Notice in this case that the price, which is $5, is below the ATC, which is 7. Price is below ATC. So we know we have a loss, but critically, the price of 5 is below the average, sorry, the price of 5, pardon me, is above the average variable cost. And therefore, the firm minimizes losses by staying open. Okay, so basically, here's the rule. If your price is below ATC, but above AVC, if you're right in the middle, keep on going. Now jump over here. The shutdown. In this case, look where it's at. Price, so we did MR equals MC. We've got that right there. So we've got our Q line. Well, notice here that the price is 2. And notice that the price is below ATC. So we know we're making a loss, but the price is also below AVC. And if you were to do the math, you would see that you're better off shutting down. You're going to lose less money by temporarily ceasing production. Graphically, notice that the price is below both of the curves. In that case, shut it down. Okay? So those, my friends, are our first of our 2 options with the loss. Notice that both of those first 2 options, the loss minimization rule and the shutdown rule, they both assumed that prices would rise back up and pull the firm out of its loss situation. But sometimes that's not going to happen. And that right here is C, our third option. If a firm is facing economic losses, and if that firm does not anticipate that prices will change for the better. In other words, if you're making losses and you do not have any reason to believe that in the future those losses will go away, if you do not anticipate that conditions will change, if you expect prices to stay low, in that case, my friends, your best option is to go out of business and to exit the industry. Note that going out of business, in contrast to a shutdown, right? Shutdown was temporary. In contrast, going out of business is a permanent decision. When you make this decision, you sell all your assets, you cease all your operations, you terminate all your leases, you lay off all your workers, and you permanently exit the market. That, my friends, is the exit case. So again, let's recap this video. We know that we now have a 3-step model to profit maximization decisions. Step 1, MR equals MC, get your Q line to find Q. Step 2, use that Q line to hit the demand curve, go left to find price. Step 3, use that Q line to hit the ATC curve and go left to find ATC. Since profit is equal to P minus ATC times Q, there's basically 3 potential outcomes. P is greater than ATC, that's a profit. Beautiful. Keep on producing. P is equal to ATC, that's going to be no profit, aka normal profit, but that's still good. Keep producing. And then there's going to be a situation where P is less than ATC and you're making losses. In that case, you have 2 sub-options. If P is greater than AVC, you're covering your variable costs, you stay open in spite of a loss. If P is less than AVC, you shut down to minimize losses. Note that both A and B imply that you expect the market to change. And the last resort decision for a firm is if they say, we're losing money, we can't cover variable costs, and we don't think this is going to change, this is the new reality, you exit. That, my friends, is a recap of the PC structure, profit maximization decisions. You now know the different setups, the different alternatives, the different outcomes, and critically, a step-by-step way to analyze. Thanks for your time. See you next time.